Okay, I think we will get started. The rest can join us. Now, everyone, this is being recorded, so I will make sure that this is sent around to everyone, but let's get started. Okay. So, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. For me, I am based on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I extend my respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Please feel free to add where you are joining from today in the chat. Okay, so a quick overview on the agenda for today's webinar. For those of you who don't know who Engage Squared is, I'll be briefly sharing an overview of who we are and what we do before passing over to today's speaker, who is Ray, and he will be sharing insights around his background and the purpose of today's session. From there, Ray will dive straight into Microsoft Purview and what data security posture management, also known as DPSM, actually is. Ray will then share a live demo of this in practice before sharing next steps and how you can introduce this within your own organisation and how Engage Squared can help. We do encourage questions in the chat and we'll be monitoring this throughout the session, but we'll also be wrapping up today's session with a dedicated Q&A so Ray can spend time thoroughly answering your questions. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with who Engage Squared are, we are a Microsoft Solutions partner founded 11 years ago in Melbourne by 3 co-founders. Since then, we have grown to more than 150 people globally with offices around Australia, New Zealand and Japan. We work with organisations of all sizes to design, build and adopt Microsoft technology across their organisations. That includes building custom apps and AI agents, delivering modern intranets, leading large-scale change management programs, and especially in today's AI era, helping organisations ensure their data is structured, secured and governed correctly so that they can innovate with confidence. Importantly for today's audience, we are a Microsoft Solutions partner in security. This means that we have consistently demonstrated to Microsoft a deep capability in helping customers safeguard their organisation with integrated security, compliance and identity solutions. We are also a solutions partner in data and AI, data and app innovation and modern work. A couple of other things I just want to share is that we are a proud member of Microsoft's Inner Circle for AI Business Solutions, and we've received multiple Partner of the Year awards, including recognition for our Copilot and agent work in Japan just last year. Finally, we have also achieved Microsoft Copilot specialization this year. This is awarded to partners who demonstrate deep technical expertise, strong governance and security practices with a proven track record of successful customer implementations. So when it comes to data and AI and security, you are in safe hands with Engage Squared. That is enough from me and who Engage Squared is. I am going to pass over to Ray to start the session. Good luck.
Thanks, Steph. You guys can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Steph can do thumbs up. So just moving on. So you guys can see that. So just a very quick intro for those that don't know me. So my name is Reyes. I'm a principal security consultant at Engage Squared. I'm a very proud husband and dad. That's kind of, my number one role in life. I've been around in IT for a very long time, 26 years and going. I've spent probably my first half of my career in enterprise in the field, so doing operational stuff, various roles from SharePoint specialist to PM, change management, security, and then sort of the second half of my career spent in consultancy, so predominantly in cybersecurity and predominantly in Microsoft security stack. I'm an ex-Microsoft. So recently just moved from Microsoft, so I was there for about 6 years, and then moved to Engage Squared probably about 2 months ago. At Microsoft, I was doing pretty much similar role, so leading the security technical lead for ANZ for Microsoft Fast Track. So everything I did was post-deployment, so all technical deployment, helping customers in enterprise and small businesses, work very directly with engineering, so know the product a little bit. Yes, and I also did author a book in Microsoft Purview, so I do like the platform. I do enjoy talking about data security with customers, and helping customers sort of their journey around data security. But more importantly, the reason why we're here. A quick question of, why we're here. I went through a lot of your answers in the survey when you did register for this webinar, so thank you so much. The majority of the answer basically touches on why we're here, which is basically Copilot and AI. The majority of the answers are you're in the beginning of your AI strategy, you're about to adopt Copilot. Some of you are in the middle of adopting Copilot, and basically just wants to know sort of if you're in the right path. And also some of you are here because you want to know how to do things right? So how to protect your data in the right way using Microsoft Purview. Microsoft Purview, which kind of leads us to a segue to Microsoft Purview. So want to give you a little bit of background where things are sort of going and where things are before. So Microsoft Purview has been in the forefront of Microsoft security solutions for, I would say, probably about 8-9 years. When it first came out, it was very much focused on compliance. So you had your traditional information protection, your DLP, very focused on manual retention, and then at later point, your advanced features came along, which is your auto labeling, your advanced analytics in user behavior, and then I think probably a few years after that comes insider risk. So insider risk management is probably one of the core features in Microsoft Purview these days. It's had a lot of investment, and I can explain that a little bit later during the demo. But for some of you that haven't deployed insider risk, I think it's about 25% of cybersecurity has insider risk activities. So for those that are considering insider risk, I think it's definitely a highly recommended feature to enable in Microsoft Purview. And then sort of, obviously, it's Microsoft Purview is evolving as months and years sort of come by. It's also evolved because of basically two main reasons. It's evolved basically for one is, and it's moving really fast because of customer feedback. So customers feeding back where potential gaps in the features, and also, it could be industry trends, whether it's healthcare or it's finance. A lot of this will feedback to the product managers to allow sort of the growth of the product. The second reason why it's growing so fast is because of cybersecurity trends. It's cybersecurity is evolving the way sort of threats are happening, and it's just on a single day, it could have millions of sort of different signals and compromises around data security breaches. And basically why we're here. Me kind of leading up to this is basically the new feature of data security posture management. And I'm going to explain this probably in my own words. So I've copied and pasted what Microsoft sort of describes what this feature is, but I'm going to basically say this in my own words, and hopefully you kind of follow through in terms of kind of probably the simplicity of the actual product itself. So essentially, this solution is a new solution that's kind of unified in two different solutions, but this solution brings clarity and clear recommendation based on your data security posture. And it's specific to customers tenants. Basically, how this solution works is it scans through your tenant on your logs and basically uses analytics to basically convert that to specific recommendations for you. The logs actually picks up patterns of risky behaviors, risky activities, whether it's data or specific to Copilot interactions or AI interactions. And basically what it does is then it basically connects that with existing policies, like whether it's DLP or insider risk, and you get all these recommendations. So for every customer, and you might be following this in your tenant while we go through this, is that you may have different recommendations with another tenant or with another customer. There are out of the box recommendation, which is a foundation recommendations, but then you may have something unique for your own sort of tenant. So just bear that in mind, that yours may look very different to other tenants, but that's going to be based on your sensitive sort of data as well as the user behavior in your tenant. So what I'm going to do next, so just bear with me. So just to give you a set the expectation. So what I'm going to do now is actually switch to a live demo, and I'm basically just going to switch windows and I'm going to go through the actual feature itself. So I'm going to switch tenants. Hopefully you guys can start seeing this. Probably the most nerve-wracking part about doing a live demo is the technology. So can you do a thumbs up if you guys can see this? Awesome. Okay, so if you are following me, if you're trying to follow me, so when you open up Microsoft Purview, where I'd like you to go to is your solutions. And then you will find DSPM, which is in preview. When I was basically saying that this is a unified version, and the reason for that is just last year, there was actually 2 different DSPM. So you had your DSPM for AI, which is more focused on Copilot interactions, Copilot activities, and AI activities, and your data security posture management, which is your classic. So both of these will retire at some point this year, I think about May or June. And then basically what Microsoft has done is basically unify these 2 features into one. And it's not just unifying it, there's also a bunch of new features that's within this feature. So I'm going to take you through this step by step. So again, setting the expectation on this, I'm not going to go through every single feature. I'm going to highlight I'm going to highlight 2 things in this sort of demo. So one is to show you how to onboard this feature for your tenant, and also just kind of highlighting some of the key things to really focus on. So the way to look at this again is setting up for use cases for Copilot experience and basically monitoring, governing those sort of AI, risky AI sort of behaviors, but as well as actually looking at your data security posture management as a whole in your tenant, right? So before we go into the features itself, the key thing to basically onboard this is to actually set up the tasks. So there are some tasks that you need to do to start this sort of feature. So for those following, so if you go into tasks and action, and there's a setup task, again, being quite transparent on this, it's a little bit tricky sort of navigating this feature. But if you spend enough time, you'll kind of get used to it. So with the setup tasks, again, probably a little bit confusing, but I want to call out some of the key things for you to really focus on. So there's 2 types of tasks that you need to look at, right? So there's a required one and there's a recommended one. The required ones are obviously mandatory. So the only required task that you need to do is actually enabling audit if it hasn't been enabled in your tenant. So for those that are fairly new to Microsoft Purview, Audit does everything in terms of logging all the activities. So everything that we do in Microsoft 365 is audited, right? So from downloading files, sharing files, interacting with Copilot or interacting with AI, everything is audited. So in order for us to basically get visibility around behavior and interactions, we need to enable this. So out of all these recommendations, this is the only one that you really have to do. The rest, so I'm going to call out, there's most of it is all of it is recommended, right? There's probably an in-between one. There's a highly recommended ones I would call out. And I'm going to call them out now to basically really enrich this feature. So there's two other ones I want to call out, which is the onboarding of devices to Microsoft Purview. So if you're a customer that's already using MDE, which is your Defender for Endpoint, you don't have to do this. So more than likely, your devices are already onboarded to MDE. So this is basically essentially the same. But if you're using another third party, you may have to still do this, which is this would automatically be on sort of a secondary. So it's a secondary sort of I guess, security. So it's not going to affect your primary MDE, your endpoint security. So you can still onboard the devices to Purview. So this will give you, allow you to kind of enable some policies to block sort of sensitive information being uploaded to, browser uploading to Copilot. So this is one of those features or tasks that I would highly recommend to definitely enable. The other one is the installing the Purview browser extension. So for this one, depending on your browser, this is compatible with Edge, Chrome, and Firefox. So the only thing you have to do here is basically deploy this to all browsers. What basically this gives you, again, it gives you a different layer of monitoring in terms of risky activities with other AI browsers. Could be Copilot, could be ChatGPT on browser, but that gives you another layer of monitoring, potentially people uploading sensitive information that you want to get visibility of. So so those two other ones that does say recommended is probably closer to a required one from my perspective. The other one that I want to call out, which is protecting your protecting your data with labels. Most of you probably in the call would, this is probably something that you are familiar with. This is probably a foundation that you should be doing anyway. So even without Copilot, data classification is one of those first steps that you need to do in order to kind of enrich the other products, but also as you probably already know, data classification probably ties in with your regulatory requirements, but also just getting visibility of your data just across your tenant, right? So but for the context of DSPM, obviously this is recommended, but this will also give us another layer of visibility, which are your documents that are potentially sensitive. So once you go through that sort of journey of labeling, just with this one, obviously it's not just a quick, I think there's a duration here. I wouldn't say it takes 5 minutes to deploy labels. There's obviously a bit of a project or a program that you need to do. So for those customers in the call that you haven't done this, technically it probably takes 5 minutes, but yes, in terms of change management, in terms of communication, training, it's going to be more than 5 minutes. So so for those new customers in Purview, definitely have a look at these four. The other gotchas that I want to call out, which is quite important, a lot of these are PAYG, all right? So a lot of these tasks would enrich the actual feature. I'm going to open one to give you an example. So this one's a mixture of two different policies, right? So these are three policies actually, but one is actually PAYG. So you only know that if it's it will call it out on the top of the policy or the recommendation, which is this. On the bottom of this, or if you are following me, you haven't opened this, it will actually ask you to start the actual policy. It will only create the policy in simulation mode, and it won't create it for a policy that's PAYG. So don't be too worried if you click on that, but it will create the ones that are you're eligible for. So it will only create it in simulation mode. So have a look at that. And in order to actually look at it and kind of define it a little bit more, you can go to the policy here, which is detecting AI sites. You can scope it with test pilot users that you want to test it out to, and so forth. So just bear that in mind, calling out those sort of key tasks that you need to do to onboard this product. But then some of these other ones that are PAYG, right? So another example is this is interaction with enterprise AI. Again, you will need that PAYG. So it's probably more around scenario based with some of these tasks. So if you are a customer that is deploying enterprise AI, you'll need to, enable sort of PAYG to get sort of visibility on this. So as a start, so step one is actually go through that task, enable your audit, enable the browser extension, and then, onboard the devices to Purview. So I'm going to jump onto the posture, and I'm going to call out a couple of things here. Again, I'm not going to go through every single feature here, but if you're not familiar with Purview or the security stack in Microsoft, what you'll see here, which is a bit of a card system, right? So with posture, or the actual posture feature, it basically is the key highlights of various sort of features or postural reports that you may be able to see. So from an admin perspective, if I open this the first time, I'm going to look at this and see and just basically see any red flags, right? So in terms of classification, can I see, if I open this up, can I see an uptake on classifications? Can I see an uptake on DLP? So from an admin perspective, this is something that I want to have a look and maybe dive into a little bit more, why the DLP activities are basically going about 100%. One thing to also call out is that this is also just a demo tenant. So what I'm seeing is quite minimal. So for you guys, if you're an admin, if you open up your own sort of production tenant, you're going to see something completely different in terms of the report and posture, right? So mine's quite minimal. So just bear that in mind. The other thing I want to call out is that if you're an E5 customer, Security Copilot comes within your eligibility. I don't have this set up on mine, but as you can see here, if you're an E5 and you should be able to run some of these prompts. These are really good prompts in terms of just getting a quick win and quick visibility. So I think when you go to view prompts, and for you guys that have enabled this, you'll get some prompt books to play with. So if you haven't set it up, but an example of a prompt could be, give me the 5 risky users that's been sharing sensitive information. So Security Copilot will give you that sort of quick visibility on those kind of prompts. So that's quite handy from an admin perspective. Other things to call out is, you've got sort of card systems around agents and, deployed in your organization. And I'll go through the AI feature, what that looks like. These 2 objectives, as you can see here, is something that is, I would say, mandatory, right? So this is probably the 2 features or the 2 policies I would highly recommend to have a look and enable. And that should appear in your objectives. So if you haven't done so, so what I'm going to do is actually open this particular objectives. So objective is basically, if you guys remember what I was calling out around audit. So audit will give you the analytics will give you recommendation. So the recommendation is basically objectives. So previously, the previous DSPM for AI, I think it was called recommendations. So this is now objectives. So if you open up objectives, or if you open up this one in particular. And you get a bit of a card system again, right? So a quick overview on the reports, the oversharing controls, Copilot interactions containing sensitive information is something obviously you want to look at. Again, from an admin perspective, it's nice to browse and see any sort of red flags. As you see here with patterns, Copilot receiving sort of sensitive information, risky AI usage, probably something to have a look at. The thing to go with the next step for you to do as an admin is to basically go into remediation plan, right? So this is the key button that you want to see. And hang on. So you can see here the plan itself is actually have 5 actions for you. So you can see there's an outstanding item there for you to have a look at. So view that remediation plan, and what's it going to do is going to tie in with the recommended policies that I was talking about. So what's happened now when I first open up DSPM is gone through enabled analytics, and it's actually given me an indication of what is my recommended sort of policies and what are my users doing. These ones are out of the box recommendations. So I just want to call that out. So what you can do here in terms of next step is to go, okay, well, I'm adopting Copilot and it needs sort of data security or sort of governance around what can I restrict in terms of sensitive information being part of Copilot, right? So if I open up this in terms of the policies not being not created yet, so this is tied in with your DLP policy. So you can open this up, and what you can do, or what you'll see, is actually what this policy does, right? So what this policy is protecting data from Copilot processing it. So with this one is, if you do press apply, it will start with simulation mode. And then the 2 new sort of features that sort of come up, or probably not 2 new features, but more recently, the DLP Copilot processing was only included for sensitive it was labels, sensitive labels that you can protect the sensitive data. But now, more recently, is that now you can include the sensitive info types. So the out of the box stuff that you can include, and as well as custom sensitive info types. So the out of the box is like your TFN, your ABN, your tax file numbers. So you can call that in terms of, I want to protect any document being processed if it has this particular conditions. So if you move along, so this one is highly recommended if you don't want those particular conditions to be being processed by Copilot, and as well as these particular ones as well. So you can go through all of this. Again, I had 5 actions to begin with. Have a look at these. These are cross between your insider risk. So if you have a look at this closely, so this will create a custom policy within insider risk. And then it will actually create these sort of indicators or enable these indicators, right? With insider risk, you can create a simulation as well. Again, it's just going to be monitoring and an alert. So just getting a visibility of what people are doing. Again, the insider risk you can tie in with DLP. So if you have, say you have a person, uploading sensitive information, you don't need to action it in terms of, I guess, creating an action to block that. But you can do it eventually in terms of recommending or creating a DLP to block those particular actions. So your insider risk is generally tied in with DLP, so you can create actions from the DLP to block those sort of behaviors eventually. So from an objectives perspective, so this is the objectives that I was talking about. If you go into that, you'll have some objectives there already. So the out of the box ones, I think this is about 30 days of scanning of user behavior. Eventually, again, depending on the customer's tenant, you may get different recommendations other than these ones that I might see. but it's important that you set up the tasks, enable the audit, and you'll get a bit more in terms of potential different recommendations. Steph, I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm not actually monitoring the chat as well, but I will get to the Q&A part of things.
We're absolutely fine, Ray. There was one question around costings, but you addressed that anyway. So I think you're explaining everything well. And yeah, just a reminder to everyone, there will be a dedicated Q&A at the end. So please feel free to continue to put questions in the chat and Ray will get to them.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I'm going to go through these sections quickly. These are quite new in terms of, so these discovers a new feature they put with DSPM, but essentially it's the umbrella sort of name for all these different sort of discovery, right? So your apps and agents, as well as your activity explorer, your asset explorer, and data risk assessment. I'll spend a little bit more time on the data risk assessment because I think that's critical for anyone that's going through a Copilot adoption. But in terms of just the admin, operational, day-to-day sort of agent monitoring and governance. So what I did as an admin, as a test and demo, I've actually enabled and deployed sort of agents in my tenant. So what I can see here is actually the agents that's being used in my tenant. So as an admin, so if I want to put some governance around this, whether I can see some sort of sensitive information being used within these sort of agents. So giving you an example would be, well, I'll just open one up randomly. So for an admin, if I did see a lot of usage around sensitive information, I can see that, if I can view the activities here, I can go through the recommendation, again, going through the out-of-the-box stuff as well as sort of behavior stuff that Purview will recommend. But as an admin, I can go through the recommendation and make sure that I've sort of ticked some of these boxes off. Obviously, based on use cases, some may not be relevant, some may be relevant. So, these are all tie in with some foundational stuff like retention, default labeling, potential DLP policies. So it's really just highlighting for any security admin to, have I tick all the boxes off? Have I created sort of, potentially a communications policy? I can see the alerts. Have I, tick off the boxes in terms of all the labels around my sensitive information? Have I created retention policies? That really matters. So from an admin perspective, I can go through the AI feature and then see all the agents from here. I can also see policies that might be related to this. So an example for this is the web chat, Copilot web chat. So again, this is probably one that I've been playing around with in my demo tenant. So I can see the activities here. So if I wanted to drill down in terms of what are people doing with Copilot chat, and this ties in with the activity explorers that we're going to go next. Maybe not today. Let me see if I open up. Maybe it's not the one. Oh, no, maybe not that one. I'll go through. Yeah, I told you technology is the one that gives me heart attacks around demos. So I might just do it this way, actually. So I'm just going to skip that part. But the Activity Explorer is actually, what's new about it is actually they've actually included the standard Activity Explorer from Purview, and have actually split that into AI activities. So with this one, this is just your out of the box sort of Activity Explorer. If I do filter this is slightly different. This is more related to just your holistic data security activities. As you can see here, I can see a lot of the activities that might be people, sharing, sensitive information from SharePoint, sensitive information from email. I can drill down to this. So from a columns perspective, I've added sensitivity labels, and you can kind of drill down to this in terms of filtering this. So you can export this, I think 30 days, 60 days. From an admin perspective, you can kind of create a, I guess, have a look at the pattern, what people are doing, if they're sharing any highly confidential stuff. So based on your labels, so something to maybe monitor. But from an admin perspective, this is a good sort of view, what people are doing. From an AI activities, you can go into the next screen, and kind of get visibility on this. So for anyone that's starting the sort of Copilot adoption, this is a good view to have a look at what people are doing. If I just filter this with a little bit more dates. And this is a cross between agents as well as Copilot, right? So there's about 4 different activities I can monitor. So from an activity type is, AI interaction. I can kind of open this up, have a look at what's actually happening. Probably wrong one to look at. I'll give you this one as an example. So probably something to highlight. There's sensitive info in this sort of activity that maybe I'm concerned of. I can see this from the interaction details. Maybe not. Love technology. Not this one. Hang on, I think it's this one. This one's a bit better. So with some of these activities, you can monitor whether a person's possibly doing or uploading sensitive information, say in Copilot, right? So what this activity has actually done is actually told me that this person's put a highly confidential document, but DLP's actually stopped that from actually happening, right? So again, something to look at in terms of user behavior. Maybe call that out in terms of when you're fully deploying Copilot for the rest of your organization, is that you can see some of the behavior that you can probably add it to sort of the change adoption or program communication training. So this is good to have to monitor over time, but also a bit of a testament to kind of iron out your communication plan, your training plan, calling out, users shouldn't be putting or uploading sensitive information to Copilot as an example, and sort of build around the program around that. So from a adoption perspective, use that. This is a good to have. From a security perspective, this is also good to have in terms of, is my DLP working, right? So if you don't have any DLP rules, what you'll see here is basically a lot of activities, but nothing is blocking it. So from a security perspective, have a look at it. Maybe it's time to create these policies to block these behaviors. So that's really handy in terms of the Activity Explorer. I'm going to jump into another critical feature in terms of onboarding or assessing your posture, which is the data risk assessment. Okay. Thumbs up if you've used this before. Maybe not. Okay. So that's kind of good news that we're going through this, right? So for me, data risk assessment is actually quite critical in terms of getting a report on getting a report with your SharePoint and OneDrive sort of posture in terms of what are people doing. So to give you an example, when you can create a custom assessment, but there's also a default assessment that's being done and scanning. With a custom assessment, you can scope this to specific SharePoint or OneDrive users. If you've got a highly confidential list of SharePoint, maybe you just want to scope that into a custom assessment. But today I'm going to show you what it looks like from a just a default assessment perspective. I'm going to open this one. So when you create the assessment, what it actually does is it goes through the document libraries of a SharePoint site. It gives you a, gives you this report. It's a very high level report. If I open this one. So it gives you the sensitive information or number of sensitive information that's being detected on the library. It also gives you a number of items that's in the site as well that might not be protected, right? So what he actually does in terms of that data coverage is it then sort of identifies the next step for you to govern and protect that SharePoint site. So from here, for someone that's sort of doing this for the first time, go through what's sensitive for you in terms of potentially obvious sites like HR or finance. Open that up if you do have permission to open that up, and go through these tabs. These are critical tabs in terms of governing and kind of diving deeper into the next steps. So for identifying this, so this one, the scan your data, you can go through this as well as this is the on-demand scan. So what it actually does is, if I go through that a little bit, show you. I have to come back to this. 5 seconds, 2 seconds, not going. I'll come back to this when it comes back. Let's go to this one. So this one's a bit more detailed in terms of the next step. So what these step does, it actually gives customers bit of a action plan to govern particular SharePoint or all your SharePoint sites. So at a glance, it gives you actually the steps to actually follow. Sorry, Steph, do you have a question?
Yes, and Miranda in the chat, Ray, was just asking if sensitivity labels are not yet deployed, what activity can be viewed in terms of Copilot usage and data sharing? So that's just to put that on your radar. If you're going to cover that one.
Yeah. Before I forget, I'll answer that now. So if you don't have labels, there are a number of things you can also do, right? So you've got that out of the box sensitivity info type. So you can leverage that. So there's hundreds of sensitive info types. Australian base, I think there's probably about 10 info types for Australia. So you've got your TFN, obviously credit cards, but you've got your Australian license, Australian passport. So if you haven't deployed labels yet, you can definitely take advantage of that for now. And also there's a number of things in terms of from a Copilot perspective, and I'll go through these steps now. So I'll go through that. I'll go through these steps first, and I'll go into that last one that you can actually do from a rolling out Copilot perspective. So you're not relying on the labels, or if the customers haven't done that section yet, you can still do a couple of more things while that program is happening. So from following these steps, obviously, it's very detailed, which is great. So DLP is recommending in terms of what you can do with DLP. So you can exclude Copilot and agents from being processed. You can it's recommending to create default labels for SharePoint libraries. So for anyone that doesn't know, you can create a default label for a library. So anyone that basically uploads any data, it will get a default label. You can assign a default label by default. So what that means is when someone opens up a document or email, it's already got a default label, right? And I can share some links around in terms of Microsoft recommendation, how to follow that. And then it goes through a little bit more advanced recommendation from auto labeling, making sure you've got your retention sort of policies in place. So for those that are not here yet in terms of your maturity, this is a really good sort of section to follow in terms of next steps, in terms of governing your SharePoint sites, and really kind of follow a more rigid sort of plan. The other piece, what you can do, especially for those that have got a Copilot license already, and E5, is that you can leverage SharePoint Advanced Management, which is basically which is the feature called SharePoint Restricted Content Discovery. What you can do with that is, if you are adopting Copilot or deploying Copilot, you may have one or two SharePoint sites that you simply don't want to include in Copilot or being discovered by Copilot, just because you're either not ready or documents are not labeled, or simply doesn't add value. It could be a very sensitive site, specific to maybe HR, specific to your VPs. You can run this particular feature to basically guardrail that specific SharePoint site. So that's one thing you can do for someone that hasn't done labeling yet, but also for those that have done labeling, right? So this is a very, very handy feature if you're not ready to include that SharePoint site. So so think about that when you're going through your Copilot adoption. I'm not sure if this is back yet. It does. So what it's actually doing is still going through a scan. Essentially what this is, give you a very quick rundown. On-demand classification goes through a scan of your cold data. So cold data could mean a document that hasn't been touched for years, hasn't been modified, it's been sitting on SharePoint, potentially before Purview came. So SharePoint Online came on probably about 2012, 13. Back at that time, probably someone dumped a whole load of data then. Everyone, someone forgot about to tell them, someone forgot to tell anyone, and then they left the business. You've got cold data sitting there that no one knows about, but potentially it's got sensitive information. So that's what cold data is. It just hasn't been touched. Purview is not aware of it. Even if you do auto labeling or scan for it from a Purview perspective, it might not find it, or it might not, detect the sort of sensitive information. But what this on-demand classification does, it goes through that sort of cold data, potential cold data you may have in SharePoint. So for those that have been using SharePoint Online for quite some time and then only adopted Purview for maybe 5 years ago, this is probably something to kind of consider. You can run this in simulation mode. So a call out is that this is PAYG, right? So it will give you a what if. It will give you some sort of cost estimation in terms of next steps. So just to watch out for this when you do run it. So just going back to this, so default assessment or custom assessment, very, very handy in terms of your Copilot adoption. I would say even critical for your Copilot adoption, just to get sort of a kind of next step plan, making sure that your sensitive sites are governed, protected. Like I said, there is a custom assessment that you can do. One of the new features that sort of came along probably came about a month ago. So this is the new item level assessment. So I'm just going to quickly give you guys what that looks like. I may have already as a test. So the difference between running a standard custom assessment is that with the item level is that you can actually tick this item level. There's a few steps that you need to do to enable this, but basically what this gives you is that that individual file scan assessment if people are actually sharing these particular files. At the moment is actually only limited to 10 sources. So you can see here it's maximum limit to 10 sources. So that's basically 10 SharePoint sites you can only run this on. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that would expand to a bit more SharePoint sites. The reality is SharePoint sites there's hundreds there for any enterprise companies. So 10 is quite small, but I imagine when DSPM comes out of preview, there might be a little bit more. So just something to test, something if you have a dummy SharePoint site, I would highly recommend to play around with this, just to see what sort of report that you might get. I'm going to cancel out of this. Conscious with time, so I'm going to. So the last one I'm going to show you guys is just the reports. So Microsoft has built in these reports. They're quite high level. You know, they're a mixture of, you know, Copilot reports, policies, AI usage. So, but it's worth actually having a look at reports that might be relevant for you, to obviously for your stakeholders, for your adoption sort of program, especially around security. I think these are some really good reports that Microsoft has built in. An example would be like, what's the most triggered DLP policies? This might, hopefully my demo works. So as an example, again, for those that are not familiar, so these are your data loss prevention policy. So what are the DLP that's being triggered more often in the last 30 days, right? Which is sometimes scary, but also if you do have that DLP policy, which is a bit of a peace of mind that you've got that, but something to also work in your program. So if you're seeing a lot of DLP policies being triggered, or specific DLP policy triggered, you could potentially build communication or training around this, but also something to kind of watch out. But my recommendation is build your training around these policies and reports. These are really good to have reports. Again, more around user behavior, more around user training, to kind of adopt this. And I think that these will be very handy, not just around Copilot, but also just so ongoing Purview programs that you may have. As you can see here, they're quite nice to have in terms of metrics that you can show your stakeholders whether DLP policies are working, your policies are working. So yeah, these are your reports. I won't go through every single one of them. What I'm going to do now, I am conscious of time. I'm going to show you a maturity level sort of program that we do at E2, Engage Squared. So just bear with me because I'm going to switch screen again. And hopefully I answered that question, that one question. I'll stop sharing.
Ray, we do just have a couple of other questions in the chat. Angela asked, is DSPM Preview available with an E3 license?
Good question. I think it's there, but a lot of the policies will probably be E5. So it's probably visible for you, Angela, but policies may not work.
Okay, and then just one other question from Dean. Can you block access to OpenAI platforms based on data classification / protective markings?
Protective marking, so if it's labeled that you're referring to, Dean, yes, you can. There would be, so from a non-Microsoft AI, it would more than likely be a PAYG interaction that you need to pay for. So anything that's non-Microsoft AI or anything that might be enterprise AI, more than likely it's a PAYG monitoring. I'm going to show you this. So in terms of what we've built in Engage Squared, so this is the maturity level program that we have as part of the offering. So everything that we've seen and everything that we've talked about around data security for AI, what I've actually done here is probably ties in around a lot of the terminologies that we use around Australian government, but also just in Australia as a whole. So for the offering maturity level, as you can see here, and probably more details coming if you want to potentially talk after this separately. But essentially the maturity level 1 all the way up to level 3 is around the adoption to AI, right? So maturity level 1 is your foundational data security classification. What we've built with Engage Squared, and one of the reasons why I joined Engage Squared is that our ability to basically define and actually connect technology with the business. And something I highly believe in terms of the change management piece. So for every program that we offer, it's got, or recommending, is that we've got that change management adoption program built into that. I think that's key for every program that you do in technology as a in general. But level 1 is your run-of-the-mill core foundation of Purview data security, your data classification. My assumption is that with level 1 is that we're going to do the test pilot for labeling, pilot that, deploy that generally in terms of the rest of your organization, and then design some of the fundamental stuff around compliance, right? So data lifecycle management, recommendation around data security posture, which is tying in with what we just talked about. Level 2 gets a bit more advanced in terms of the advanced features of Purview. So we're talking about analytics, talking about auto labeling, talking about building your custom sits, which is your custom sensitive info types. So it could, a lot of organization may rely on the built-in sensitive info types, but some of them may have something that's unique for them. So it's actually important to identify some of the unique patterns within your organization, so we can, get that sort of pattern and exactly, govern that and protect those sensitive information within your organization. So maturity level 2 is really targeting a lot of these advanced features around Purview, and then really, level 1, level 2, once you get that sort of core pieces of Purview, a lot of the level 3 is around, again, more advanced stuff in Purview, but also just really operationalizing what Purview means on a day-to-day basis, right? Tying this in with the rest of the security stack, which really enriches the Purview product. So when I say integration, which is your Defender XDR, Security Copilot, what this means for your day-to-day, for your security team, and then going through your on-demand, going back to the cold data that we talked about. And really level 3 is really where adoption with AI, right? I imagine that when you get to this level is that you are ready for, your Copilot readiness. And this is really how we've designed this level sort of maturity program. But you can see at the end of each one, it's got that sort of going back to the posture, going back to the data security posture to see if there's any more recommendation. Essentially, the program doesn't stop. It's really just kind of refining where that program lies, on a quarterly basis or monthly basis. But yeah, in terms of what we do at Engage Squared is that this is where our offering is, but this is also built around my experience, having worked at Microsoft, working with hundreds of enterprise companies doing the same thing, different scenarios. So this is really kind of put into one slide. But again, going to leave a bit more time in terms of Q&A. I might open up the chat and see if there's any question. Hopefully my 1 hour of rambling on. I see any questions here. Okay, I think we answered all of them. Guys, any questions? Might leave it for a few seconds I know it's one of those awkward moments. If there is not a question, then we can move forward. Yeah, it's not too scary, Joel. It's I think because of AI, because of it's new, there's a lot of talks around the AI risks and how he exposes data. I think it's a bit of a blessing in disguise, what Copilot has done or what AI has done. I think it's kind of thrown organization into a bit of a tour to go back to the fundamentals and the core data security and compliance. So I think it's really just kind of refining that, and it's not scary. We should have done the core stuff years ago, but I think we're just going back to basics and kind of taking advantage of what Purview's kind of offering us. Okay, so I know it's one of those Q&A where it could be quiet, it could be could be full of discussions, but I'm going to leave it in terms of the next steps. So Steph, I think you've got this part.
Yes, so some next steps from Engage Squared. I will be emailing everyone who's both attended and registered for this webinar. I will be sharing some relevant ways to contact us. I will be sharing a link to this recording as well as this PowerPoint deck. And then also just a short 2-minute survey. These kind of surveys really help us improve future webinars. So we do ask that you fill that out, please. And then next steps from you, think about your own use cases in your own organizations, and consider setting up a task in DSPM, and then just get a feel for where you're at in your own maturity level. And then from there, we would love to continue the conversation. Obviously, you've all heard from Ray today, but we have a whole team dedicated to security. So we would love to continue the conversation. If you can't wait for me to email you, which will be by tomorrow, there is a QR code there on the screen. Please make sure that you scan it now, and you will get taken through to our landing page for this webinar where you can contact us. Or alternatively, there is our email address there and a telephone number. So we hope to hear from you. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, now is your last opportunity, or forever hold your peace. I think you're all quiet on the chat.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Amazing. All right. Well, we hope to hear from you by